Hey, high performer. If you've ever struggled with feelings of guilt or beating yourself up because you didn't get a perfect score on your health routine or you missed a health goal, this episode is for you. We're unpacking perfectionism, something a lot of high performers battle, and why trying to be perfect in your health journey is actually hurting you more than helping. I'm going to talk about four of the most common perfectionism traps and how you can overcome this mindset with simple and actionable steps. You're going to feel encouraged, empowered, and more capable than ever by the end of this episode. Welcome to Wellness for High Performers, where ambitious people discover the path to sustainable wellness that actually feels good so they can build the dream without burning out. I'm your host, Erica Jones. I'm a wellness strategist and entrepreneur, and I help high performers create massive momentum by weaving wellness into their daily life. So the other week, the unthinkable happened. We have total washlets in our house. It turns a regular toilet into a bidet. It has nice warm seats and other perks that you would find with a bidet. Well, the first one we had broke, the one that was in our master bathroom, and we finally got around to ordering a new one that was recently installed. Great. Well, the next morning, my husband woke up to massive water damage in our house. Our master is right above the kitchen. And after the bidet was installed, the plumbing was not tightened and it leaked all the way through the first floor to the kitchen and down into the bottom floor of my basement, which is finished. So, if you've ever dealt with any kind of water damage or remediation of any kind in your house, you know that the whole process, it's extremely stressful. You have to deal with insurance companies, contractors, remediation specialists in your house, fixing things. The whole process is so not fun. And of course, this happens right before the Christmas holiday. So that triggered my stress at a totally different level. Water damage is bad enough. But what's worse about this is that we went through a similar scenario not even 2 years ago. Almost the exact same thing happened with an issue with the master toilet that caused water damage in the kitchen. So my kitchen was in shambles for over a month back then. So seeing all of that water damage again just sent me. I was like, I already know what this will entail, and I am not ready for this, not before Christmas. But it wasn't just the water damage that was amping me up. I was already stressed from trying to wrap up the homeschool semester, dealing with multiple requests on my time for our doctor coaching business. And I'm really diligent about working out according to my schedule throughout the week. But with all of the water damage, it had affected my whole house. It had affected my workout area in the basement. So one of the days after all this water damage stuff had happened, my workday had run over because I was training someone. And by the time I looked up, I only had like 15 minutes to move my body. But my typical workout space was totally unusable because of the water leak. So I go outside, I throw the ball around with the dog instead of weight training. And later that night, after we had eaten dinner and cleaned up, I was fighting that feeling of failure around my consistency streak in my workout routine. I'll have to do another podcast episode on that journey sometime, but it took me many years to get on a structured schedule for exercise that actually worked for me. So, as I was sitting at dinner that night, the feelings of guilt were creeping up. But rather than spiraling downward and beating myself up, I decided to squash it. I ended up going for a nighttime walk with Isaac in the neighborhood. And that not only felt like a physical win for movement, because I was just sitting for way too long that day, but it also helped me to clear my head and gain some perspective. Sometimes when we're stuck inside our own four walls, our world can feel overwhelming. I've experienced that so many times that just getting outside and breathing in the fresh air can help add perspective. And it creates this little opening for the truth for us to embrace. And that truth is that things can always be worse and I will get through it. God, give me the strength to get through it because I know I'm not being given more than what I can handle. So we go for a walk outside. We have a great conversation, and my perspective begins to shift, which is what I needed. But the perfectionist in me sometimes wants to magnify the drama of the situation and make it mean something that it doesn't. So, for example, missing a workout day for a perfectionist mind could spiral into, well, why do I even bother? Something always happens to derail me versus the growth minded individual is more so thinking about the learnings in the process. So for me, it's wow, look at how far I've come in being consistent with the fitness routine. I should look for a super fast, no equipment workout that I can do in 10 to 15 minutes for days like this when my plans get derailed. So you see the difference. The one is kind of a victim mindset. Why do I even try? Something always happens to derail me versus the growth minded individual is taking that friction and getting creative with solutions. So that's the difference between the perfectionist mind and the one that views setbacks as an opportunity to grow. The thing to think about is that anytime we're making a commitment with our health, there's a process that's necessary. And the first part is making sure we're only committing to what's simple, strategic, and sustainable. This is what I call the LFA's method, and I fully explained it in episode 2. So that's first simple, strategic, sustainable. But provided all of those boxes are checked, we also have to manage our expectation because perfection isn't the goal. Why? Because mastering your wellness is not a perfect process. It's very much an iterative process. First, you have to have repetition of the habits, the consistency. Without the consistency, you don't have real feedback on your progress or on the process. Secondly, the habits are refined. They're further developed as you continue to grow and evolve on your journey. This process of iteration is critical if health mastery is the goal. So, resetting the expectation, especially when we're talking about wellness, is key. It should be understood that iteration is the pathway to growth. You're going to try different strategies, you're going to try different approaches along the way, and you will tweak and adjust and refine as you make progress. So, my refinement to my fitness regimen is that I have a fallback workout that requires zero equipment and can be completed in 10 to 15 minutes for those days when things just don't go as planned. And I always want to be ready to give my best effort, but I also understand that there will be some mistakes and setbacks along the way. Even when you're 15 plus years in, like me, the process of adjusting and growing never ends. So, mentally preparing for this is a very important part of building a resilient mind, a major factor for your success with anything, not just wellness. By expecting some mistakes instead of demanding of yourself a perfect record, you can lessen the impact of those mistakes, making it easier to get back on track. I cannot reiterate enough that so much of the heavy lifting is in your mind. So, hopefully, I've convinced you at least a little bit that you don't need Batman level discipline or a perfect track record to transform your health. To dive deeper into this, let's talk about the 3 perfectionist traps that you'll want to avoid because they can undermine your best efforts. Number 1 is the all or nothing thinking. Perfectionists tend to throw in the towel and give up at the very first hiccup or mistake. This completely disrupts the process of maintaining consistency with habits and refining your approach along the way. So, for example, let's say someone has a nutrition plan that they want to stick to in order to lose weight. Well, the first question I'm asking is the plan simple, strategic, and sustainable? That is the first litmus test. Without a strong yes for those, it's almost doomed to fail from the beginning. It's a non start. But let's say all those things are true. And for whatever reason, the first weekend on the nutrition plan, they fall off because maybe they were invited out to dinner with friends and they didn't know how to navigate that. Well, a perfectionist mind will say, this nutrition plan doesn't work and I can't figure this out. I'm going to fail with this weight loss goal, so I may as well not even try. It's all or nothing thinking. Instead, what they could do is take the mistakes as valuable information that's used to inform future decisions. So perhaps next time they're invited out to dinner with friends, they view the menu ahead of time and consciously make a healthy choice before arriving. Or maybe they eat in advance. So when they go to dinner, they're feeling a lot more full and less likely to overindulge in foods that are off the health plan. There's just a lot of options there. But if the effort is given up too quickly, there's just not an opportunity to improve and therefore see results. So that's the all or nothing mindset. The other thing a perfectionist will run into is emphasizing deliberation or researching over taking action. A perfectionist will spend a ton of time looking for the right nutrition plan, exercise routine, or a perfect sleep schedule. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with gathering information, but a perfectionist will spend an unreasonable amount of time on this step in an effort to make the quote unquote perfect choice. It's essentially analysis paralysis instead of feeling empowered. But if you understand and accept that wellness is a process, it's not a perfect process, you just get on the court and you take action, even if it's imperfect. You know that moving forward, you're going to tweak and optimize down the road anyway. So there's no point in wasting time with overanalyzing. And speaking of overanalyzing, that brings me to point number 3, which is the obsession over mistakes. And I think I tend to struggle with this in general, not just around wellness, that if I mess something up in the past, I've had a hard time forgiving myself for letting it go. I've had to be very conscious of that and how it can creep into my life, into my wellness strategy. And I also know that in general, this tends to be a challenge for high performers. We can be so goal oriented that we forget to acknowledge the progress that we've made thus far. That's what we should be doing on the health journey, looking back often and celebrating. And I kind of don't like that word celebrating. It honestly just feels extra to me. Like when people say, how are you going to celebrate reaching that goal or milestone? To me, I don't always need further celebration for something I should already be doing. Reaching the goal is the reward, but I'm achiever oriented. So if you want to celebrate, do your thing. I love it. But if you're like me and it feels weird to celebrate something like sticking to a workout regimen, the thing to do is acknowledge it. So look back on where you started from and how far you've come. It's simply a nod to the progress made. And yes, this applies even when you've made a mistake or you've missed the mark. I would say it applies especially in that scenario. So don't put too much weight on a single day's failures. It could be feeling guilty over impulse eating or staying up too late scrolling. You just get back on track tomorrow. The perfectionist mind likes to zone in on the missteps and even sometimes wallow in the negative emotions because sometimes that becomes the excuse to quit, you know? Don't allow yourself to overemphasize the impact of one mistake. That's valuable energy that isn't serving you at the highest level. So take that energy and invest it in troubleshooting and asking, what went wrong? How can I improve? What have I learned from this? Maybe it's that during the weeks when I'm traveling, I need a different fitness plan or nutrition strategy or whatever it is. The last point on perfectionism, and another reason why you should totally leave it in the ditch, is that it contradicts the human experience. Imperfection is practically a natural law for humanity. It's simply part of being a living, breathing human. How many times does a young child stand on wobbly legs and fall before they begin to walk? With my little ones, it happened countless times. So, what person, including you, can learn anything without mistakes as part of the process? Even if there is a case for this, and I'm doubtful that there is, it is my belief that true perfection is reserved for God alone. And by demanding it of ourselves, we place an unnecessary burden on our shoulders. That's a pressure we simply can't live up to consistently. So now that we've covered all the ways that perfectionist thinking sabotages, even derails your health, let's get into the practical strategies on how to overcome it. Because if you're like me and it's easier to fall into this, it's not something you one day wake up and it's gone. At least I've never had that or experienced that. It's something that you can overcome with practice. So here's what I routinely do to overcome perfectionism. Number one is I document my wins. This may seem like a waste of time. And it sounded so cheesy to me when I first was introduced to the concept in a business mastermind, but it truly helps to crush the mindset of perfectionism. High performers tend to forget their successes, immediately move on to the next goal once the previous one has been achieved. So to combat this, I regularly document my wins. Sometimes I do this daily, sometimes weekly, but I always have a list I can refer back to at the end of the month. And I put my lists in a notebook so I can look back and see my progress. I jot down things that I accomplished that are tangible, like launching a product or making a slam dunk hire or finishing a book, but also the intangibles that are oftentimes even more important, like an insight I read in a book that I was reading, or a really great date with my husband, or special moments that I've had with the children. Writing these things down is a personal acknowledgement that I'm moving forward with my goals and I'm doing much better than I typically think. The second way to overcome perfectionist thinking is to talk yourself out of the downward spiral. As I mentioned before, mistakes tend to trigger perfectionists. Then those mistakes turn into a flurry of negative self talk that beats you up and crushes your momentum. I counter this with daily affirmations. This is another one I didn't fully believe in until I tried it. Affirmations are self empowering statements meant to support you mentally and emotionally as you make positive behavioral changes. They are one of the most powerful ways to influence your belief in yourself. They aren't magic, so you really need to believe what you're saying. But when you do, their regular repetition can lead to the development of new neural pathways, promoting more positive thinking patterns. So, positive thinking is like a muscle that gets built in the brain. A simple habit of affirmations in the morning can make it much easier to build yourself up after you've made a mistake. This is exactly what a perfectionist needs to avoid the downward spiral. So try an internet search or use AI to generate affirmations around the topic you're interested in, like fitness affirmations or sleep affirmation. I've used this technique not just as a daily habit in the morning, but also to lift me up during a discouraging moment or situation. I tell myself, this is all going to work for your good. You're going to be better. You're going to be stronger. You're going to be more powerful for having gone through this. God is supplying everything I need to get through this situation. And the more I speak, the more uplifted I become and the more encouraged I feel. The number three way to overcome a perfectionist mindset is to evaluate what's working and what isn't. This has been a huge benefit for me, not just on my health journey, but in life in general. I am constantly making notes of what's working for me and what isn't. The things that work, I double down on. The things that aren't working get changed. So, for example, I used to take meeting requests at any time during my workday in an effort to support our team. But often my days were fragmented. My workout time was booked over with Zoom calls, and I felt stressed and like I was failing because I wasn't following through on my exercise goals. Well, after a little bit of reflection, I realized I need to create boundaries around my schedule so I can prioritize my workouts. And once I communicated this to my assistant, my calendar was blocked. No meetings were scheduled during that time. And it made it so much easier to follow through and be successful with my goal. So take those failures. They aren't really failures, but take those missteps, if you will, and use them as feedback to improve and get better. So here's my final thoughts on this. Mastering your health is not a linear process, but something to work toward over a lifetime. You can ask anyone who's lost a lot of weight and managed to keep it off. That's an important caveat. Anyone who's massively improved their sleep or reversed a chronic condition, they didn't score a perfect record. They were consistently showing up and taking action despite slip ups and mistakes. So, my encouragement to you is that while some discipline is necessary, you don't need to be perfect. You will experience some mistakes along the way, but what's more impactful than the mistakes is how you respond to them. You are climbing a mountain without a summit. Rather than getting frustrated that you haven't yet arrived at your destination with perfect execution, speed, and agility, simply do your best, acknowledge your progress, and enjoy the climb. Well, my friend, thank you for being here. I hope you're leaving this episode feeling more clear on your next step, more grounded, more energized, and even more capable of building the life you want. For deeper conversations like this, join me at elevays.com. That's ELEVAYS.com, and get on the list for my weekly newsletter, The Elite Edge. It's where I share insights you won't find anywhere else. I'll see you in the next episode, but until then, make time for what matters.